encounter.
It feels very
Hello and welcome to another installment of the Unwanted Opinion podcast, where this is part 2 of our last episode, where we are doing reviews for Marcell, the Shell with Shoes On, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantum Mania.
One week, 2 episodes. You guys are lucky.
1 week, 2 episodes. You guys are getting spoiled here. Hearing our voices for like 2 hours. But I guess I'll just start with Marcell, the Shell with Shoes On, which is the Academy Award nominated animated Best Feature, and it's directed by Dean Fletcher Camp, and it's based off of a lot of little short films with just called Marcell, the Shell with Shoes On 1, 2, and 3, which also has Jenny Slate playing Marcell and coming back from doing those shorts. So the plot of Marcell, the Shell with Shoes On, quite a mouthful, is that one day Marcell and his gran Connie wake up to find that the rest of their family have all been disappeared in the night, because what's happened is they live in this house where a couple are having frequent arguments and eventually break up, and within one night the man storms out and takes all the shells away with him by accident, because they all like to hide in the sock drawer when they argue. It's a safe haven for them all, and they also like to be there. But what they've done is they've accidentally taken 18 of the 20 members of the family. So Marcell is left to look after his granny Connie in this massive house, and one day a documentary filmmaker named Dean comes into the scene, and it's just staying in Airbnb because he's also broken up with his partner, and discovers Marcell there and decides to document his life. And so the film takes on a mockumentary style, should I say, following Marcell in his little life. The story behind this is quite interesting, because what happened is the writers behind this and the director, Dean Fletcher Camp, actually started making this film and then got divorced from him and his partner divorced.
Oh, wow.
And though that's why it sort of becomes the setup of this film of why there's a couple divorcing and the sort of effects that has, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
But it's funny, Gonzalo, because you and I last week were talking about Wally,
Yes.
and I said to you how Wally really works because he's just this perfectly pure and innocent character, and you fall in love with him quite quickly.
Yeah.
And the exact same thing can be said about Marcell the Shell.
Yeah.
He is the most endearing, charming, and purely innocent character since someone like Wally. Within 10 minutes, I was just loving Marcell. I was loving his Jenny Slate's voice is so adorable. The way he just goes about his everyday life and using everyday environments in a really creative way to sort of, live his life and look after his gran. It's so endearing within those first 10 minutes. And making those types of characters, purely innocent characters who have very, very little flaws and aren't cynical at all, really, are actually really hard to make. They can come off as quite annoying or just too naive, but Marcell is, just adorable, and I loved him and the interaction with Connie.
Because that's the thing, when you write a
his
character specifically for the audience to fall in love with them, if the audience doesn't fall in love with them, you're fucked.
Yeah, exactly. The relationship between him and the guy making the documentary, Dean, who's also the name of the director, the way those two, just their interaction, the friendship they make is just so believable. It's so lovely. It's so nice, and the film is just every 5 minutes you're laughing. It's just really inventive, the way it's humor and the way Marcell perceives the world and his sort of take on it is just great fun. And the film itself is about change and our fear of change itself. It's not only reflected by Marcell's reluctance to search for his family and fear that it endangers his gran's life, but also the process of change is like the inciting incident of the whole thing. Change of a breakup, change of a marriage, people changing and then growing apart. That's very much a major aspect of this film, and it's something that's actually said in this film. And there's a great thing of also this fear of change is something his gran says, is that sometimes she literally just says, let's forget about fear. Let's just forget about it. Let's just put it aside and just head straight on and deal with this, right? And I loved that, and I loved some of the dialogue and some of the quotes in this film. And it's a film that, while it also takes the mockumentary approach, like The Office and things like that, it's really cinematic. There's points where the way they use visual storytelling to sort of, I won't spoil it here, there's an aspect which is so cinematic where no words are spoken and you get exactly what's happening. And I was genuinely moved to tears twice by this.
Wow.
one out of obviously something sad, and then another thing out of just happiness. It's
Again, very reminiscent
was
to
just
Wally then.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I going into it, I was not expecting to be as moved as I was and taken by Marcel,
Mm.
but I just loved his character. I loved the interactions with all the other characters, the way it just really, really moved me. I'm sorry, I was kind of lost for words there, just thinking
Yeah.
about it. But there's also more, I guess, cynical aspects to
Mm.
it in terms of like other themes it looks at. It looks at sort of the insincerity of social media
Mm.
and how that actually, what that's doing is actually it demonstrates a lack of community. And
Mm.
there's this whole thing where Marcel kind of blows up on YouTube because everyone's like, "What the hell's Marcel?" And they fall in love with him just as the audience does. And actually, people using Marcel for clout
Mm.
and just
Yeah.
like, oh, here's Marcel's house, and using that to get numbers on like TikTok and
Yeah.
YouTube and things like that. And that's something that, because of Marcel is so pure, he can immediately clicks to it,
Mm.
as
Mm.
in, as he says, actually, he says, I love this line. He goes, "There's so much nothing." Like, they're actually giving nothing. What they're commenting on all these feeds, it's empty. It doesn't mean anything because they're not going to do anything. They're not actually going to help. And I
Mm.
was like, it's something deeply pure and is a film that makes you smile so much as Marcel. That's a really, really sort
Oh
of
yeah.
heavy and quite profound thing to say as
Yeah.
well. That's the thing. The film is actually very profound at points too, a lot with the very cinematic aspects of it. Yeah, I loved Marcel Show. I actually loved this film, and although Pinocchio is still kind of edges it for me in Best Animated Feature,
Yeah.
if Marcel Shell won, I would be
Yeah.
absolutely so happy for it because it's that good. And yeah, I'm giving
Two
Marcel Shell a
great stop
solid.
motion contenders this year. Who would have
Yes,
thought?
two fantastic animated
None of
films
them from
from
Laika as
not big
well. Like,
studios.
damn.
None of them from like a DreamWorks or a
Yeah.
Disney or a Pixar.
No, it's incredible.
Yeah, I love Marcel the Shell, and I'm giving it a solid 9 out of 10.
Hmm.
So, that
Wow.
was Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.